So Howard Lutnick walked into a United States Senate hearing this week with his standard position. Canada is dependent. Canada is cornered. And anyone who disagrees just doesn't understand leverage. Well, he walked out having been publicly challenged by a sitting American senator who told him directly that his approach is costing American businesses real money.
And here's the line that changes everything. The senator didn't say Lutnick's strategy is costing Canada. She said it is costing America. Tourism revenue, border community income, seasonal employment in American states. That damage is now on the congressional record, and it shifts the entire picture of this confrontation.
Because when Washington's own officials start documenting the domestic costs of this strategy in a formal Senate proceeding on camera, well, that's not Canada complaining into the void anymore. That is America being held accountable by its own people using its own data. And that is a categorically different moment.
So let's walk through what actually happened at that hearing, because every detail matters here. Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire confronted Howard Lutnick directly. Her state's tourism industry, its second largest economic sector, has recorded a 30% drop in Canadian visitors. And her question to Lutnick was direct. How does publicly insulting your closest trading partner help the American businesses that depend on Canadian spending?
And Lutnick's answer? This is the United States Commerce Secretary here, the person whose job is to understand what American trade relationships actually produce. And his answer was, Canada needs us more. And then he pivoted to dairy, which is where this really falls apart, because the U.S. keeps arguing that Canada is blocking access. But in multiple years, American producers haven't even filled the dairy quotas they already have under the agreement. So the problem isn't access. It's not like trucks are lining up at the border being turned away. The access exists. It's just not being fully used.
Which tells you this isn't really about dairy. It's a talking point to rile up his base who doesn't know the meaning of fact-checking. It's a point that sounds good politically, but it doesn't match how the system actually works on the ground.
And then it got even more telling. Lutnick said it was insulting that Canadians aren't buying American alcohol.
And the senator's response? Well, she made it personal. Her own family has a stake in a company that sells American spirits. And even then, she said the same thing. You don't get cooperation by insulting your closest ally.
So, when pressed on documented economic damage to American border states, the U.S. Commerce Secretary's response was to start talking about Canadian dairy policy and our booze boycott. And that pivot tells you more than any answer he could have given. Because if you have a real response to why are Canadian visitors down 30% in New Hampshire, you give that response. You don't change the subject to milk and alcohol.
But Senator Shaheen had one more piece of data on record before that hearing was done. She cited that the United States is the only major economy in the world that saw a decline in international visitors last year. That is a U.S. senator in a U.S. hearing using U.S. data to document what Washington's own posture has produced.
He had no answer for the dairy. He had no answer for the alcohol. He had no answer for the 30%. He had no answer for anything, or for being the only major economy losing international visitors.
So Lutnick's entire argument tells you everything about Prime Minister Carney and what his team is dealing with heading into a major trade review. You've got American businesses losing money, a U.S. senator raising the alarm, and the response is still a playground mentality. That's Lutnick's position.
Now let's put the full statistical picture on this, because the New Hampshire number is one data point inside a much larger documented set. Statistics Canada reported that in January 2026, Canadians completed 2.1 million trips to the United States. That's down 22% from January 2025.
And the important thing about that number is what's behind it. This wasn't a government program. There was no coordinated campaign, no official boycott structure, and no central organizer directing Canadians where to spend their money. That 22% is just millions of Canadians reaching the same conclusion together. Not this year, we're going somewhere else.
Yep. And that distinction is what Washington is most badly underestimating. An organized boycott ends when the politics shift. You issue a statement, a relationship stabilizes, and people go back. But behavior driven by accumulated negative experiences like tariffs, annexation rhetoric, months of public hostility, that requires a fundamentally different reversal. You're not unwinding a campaign. You're rebuilding trust that was spent down over a sustained period. Millions of Canadians have built new travel habits, new spending patterns, new relationships with destinations that weren't the United States. And once those patterns are established and they're working, once people have been to Portugal or the Maritimes or Costa Rica and had a great experience, well, then the US has to earn them back. It doesn't get them back by default. And listen, even if the dairy quotas changed or alcohol went back on the shelves, you're not going to see Canadians buying US alcohol or running out to get that hormone-stuffed US milk. It's just not going to happen.
No way. Now let's talk about the CUSMA review, because this is where the timing of that Senate hearing, it becomes genuinely consequential. CUSMA, as you all know, the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement, is due for review really soon. It governs the terms of trade across North America. It covers auto manufacturing, agriculture, supply chains, energy, lumber, dairy, the full system of how our countries interact.
And the Trump administration's pre-negotiation position has reportedly been this: Canada should pay an entry fee before formal negotiations even begin, before Canada even enters the room. And Canada's response, well, it's been really clear. No, we're not paying just to get in the room.
And Prime Minister Carney's response, it was very clear. He said, it's not a case of the United States dictates the term. We have a negotiation. We can come to a mutually successful outcome. It will take some time, and we will take the time.
Now that is the level-headedness of a true world leader. Ignore the rhetoric and get to work. Both sides bring demands to the table. That's how negotiations actually function.
So let's be clear about what Lutnick accomplished in that hearing. Not what he intended to accomplish, but what he actually produced. He went in to reinforce the image of Canada as a weaker party in this negotiation. He came out having given Canada's negotiating position validation from inside the U.S. government. Canada's Liberal majority won on a platform of standing firm against exactly this kind of pressure. It's not a government that walks into CUSMA looking for a way to hand Lutnick a win. It's a government that walks in with a Senate hearing in its file and the Canadian people behind them holding the line and refusing to give their money to a hostile nation.
So here's the full picture for everybody, and this is where we want to make sure to be clear. What happened in that Senate hearing is not an isolated event. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is the most visible evidence so far that something has been building for months.
Washington's aggressive posture toward Canada was built on three assumptions. First, that Canada's economic exposure was so total that any serious confrontation would force Ottawa to fold. Second, that the damage from this confrontation would flow one direction, towards Canada. And third, that Canadian public and consumer response would be very short-lived. The last several months have disproven all three, and Senator Shaheen's hearing put that disproof on congressional record.
So here's our question for you today. With an American senator now on the congressional record documenting the domestic cost of Lutnick's approach, and with the CUSMA review approaching, does Washington recalibrate before formal talks begin?
Or does the entry fee demand hold and the standoff deepen further?
And if it deepens, which one breaks first? American border state economies or Washington's political will to keep this posture going? And as always, if this gave you the full picture of where this negotiation actually stands, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the context.
And check out our merch, Substack, and Facebook in the pinned comment below. And remember, we are here every single day. So we'll see you tomorrow, everybody.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Ciao for now.